Time is a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective, hosted by Tim Ullman and Jack Caliber. The ULC envisions a future in which all congregations fully equip the priesthood of all believers through world-class leadership development at the local level. Lead Time taps into biblical wisdom for practical solutions to today's burning issues. Each podcast confronts real-time struggles facing the local church in a post-Christian culture. Step into the action with the ULC at uniteleadership.org. This is Lead Time.
Welcome to Lead Time. Tim Allman here. Jack Kalberg is still caring for his wife, recovering from surgery, praying for you, Marta. But today, I pray wherever it is you're taking this in, hopefully you've got your water, you're leaning in, you want to learn, you've got humility, and you want to grow and be challenged. That's what this conversation today is going to be about with a new friend of mine and relatively new brother pastor in the Pacific Southwest District, Reverend Bill Maggard. Now, before Bill shares his story and becoming a pastor, I just want to start out by saying I really appreciated you, brother, reaching out to me and your humility, a really, really kind email. We get a lot of responses from different folks based on our conversations, and your email in light of my conversation with Christian Preuss, Reverend Christian Preuss, was very, very kind. So thank you for reaching out. Today's conversation is going to be hopefully enlightening. There will be some brotherly conversation regarding how the church should function and be restored to health, as we need all types of pastors to reach all types of people with all types of churches in this ever-changing day and age, with the foundation being the scriptures and the Lutheran confession. So I pray that's what you hear today as Bill and I get the conversation going. So tell us a story, kind of late in life to the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod, and tell that faith journey all the way up to this point, Bill. Thank you.
Wow, that's a big story, and it's not a tragedy, thank God, but it is a little long. I have a wonderful Christian mother, and my father was not a Christian. But my father served in the Air Force for 20 years. And so we moved around a lot. And we would go to the base chapel. And if you've ever been in a base chapel, you know that they have a Protestant service and they have a Catholic service. And so the Protestant service really depends on who your chaplain is. And looking back at what we were taught and kind of the hymnody and that sort of thing, it was basically Methodist. So decision theology. The focus of the Christian life is your works, not necessarily Christ. Although they have a deep appreciation for Christ, of course. But then it becomes kind of about you. And so I grew up with that and was very devoted, even to the point I got bullied at times because I wouldn't curse in middle school. So I was bullied. And then I joined the Navy, and that was a problem because I was not able to withstand the temptations that came to me. And so I fell away from the faith. I fell away from the church. And it took a while. It wasn't like an overnight thing, but it was really devastating. And I kind of made a mess of my life. I got a girl pregnant in college, and then we got married, and it was very tumultuous. My fault, not hers. And a divorce happened out of that. I am so thankful to God for my beautiful daughter who I have out of that. But it was not a good time, and I hurt people and hurt myself. And so I kind of made a mess of things. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should go back to church. Maybe that's what I should do. And so I started at my mother's church, which was charismatic / Pentecostal kind of church. It was a very big church, very warm, very lovely people. It's in Memphis. And if you have never been hugged by a Black woman from Memphis, you have never been hugged. I tell you what, it's pretty amazing, the hospitality that they showed. But I had some troubles with the theology there, and specifically with tongues. And so I really wrestled with that. I prayed to God for the so-called gift of tongues, and he never gave it to me. And now I understand that the modern form of what they call speaking in tongues is something different than what we see in the scriptures. But it was a real struggle, and it's my mother's church, and I love my mother dearly, and so I didn't want to disappoint her. But John MacArthur and Hank Hanegraaff both helped me understand the phenomena of the charismatic movement, and so I was also a listener to the White Horse Inn, and so I went to a Presbyterian church, and that church was, I don't know how to describe it, but I ended up going to a different Presbyterian church, and that church was a huge 5,000 member church growth kind of church. And that's how we would describe it. And somewhere way down deep, they have the Westminster Confession of Faith, which I love or loved, but you didn't really hear a lot about it. The pastor knew it, talking to him one-on-one, you could talk about it, but it never showed up in the teaching or the sermons. And but I met my current wife there, and we've been married now over 20 years, and it's been fantastic, and I thank God for her as well. And I moved back to Wyoming, where I had gotten into this trouble, and to be around my daughter. And so we tried a church there, and I wanted a Reformed Calvinist church. And at the time, thank God, there was no Reformed Calvinist church in Casper, Wyoming. So we tried everything. And, okay, I love you, Baptists, but we got so desperate, I even tried a Baptist church. And I love picking on the Baptists, but I love them too, because one thing I love about the Baptists is they love the Bible. And I think that's something that we can definitely emulate for sure. And so we finally settled for a Presbyterian Church USA, which is the equivalent of our ELCA. So yeah, they have the Book of Concord somewhere buried down deep, but it's been, they kind of pick and choose what they like. And it's the same with the Presbyterian Church of the USA. And we love the old people in the congregation and the Sunday school. And so we settled for that. And finally, the pastor was talking in some very weird ways. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. But then me and my wife have a conundrum. Where are we going to go? We don't know. And so my wife is in tears in her office, and she works at the local college. And one of the student workers said, well, why are you crying? And she said, well, we want to go to church, but we don't know where to go. And so she said, why don't you come to my church? And it was an LCMS church. In fact, the same church that Christian Preuss is now serving at. And so she took us, and I heard one sermon from John Hill, who was the pastor at the time. He's now the district president there in Wyoming. I'm like, this is it. We have found the church. We have found the place to be. And my wife was not at first very happy about that, because at the time, it might be characterized as maybe a colder kind of German type of church. And I think that has changed, but typical, I loved it. But my wife was not very happy, but I'm like, I don't care. Did you hear that sermon? And so we did our adult instruction, and it took, I don't know, about 4 months, something like that, and joined the church. And it was just fantastic. An amazing church. And I got to serve on the Board of Education, and eventually I became the chair and tried to serve in that capacity. And through that, I learned a lot about classical Lutheran education. But, I will say it was a shock, because it was Divine Service 3, or page 5 and 15. It was, they have a really good hymnody there. And the preaching, it can sound severe to non-Lutheran ears. And so it is different, and it took a while to get used to it. But once I understood what was going on, it was like, wow, I don't ever want anything different. And through that process, the first book I got was the Book of Concord, and I started reading it. And it's a great book. I think the CPH Reader's Edition, that's the best thing they have put out. And I think it's fantastic, because that is not the possession of pastors. It's the possession of everyone. And I would love for more of us to read it regularly. But because of that, you can tell I'm probably theologically minded. And the first time the recruiter came by, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ask him, does my past exclude me from being a pastor? And he said, not necessarily. I said, okay. And I didn't apply at the time. I was too new, and so I had gone back and forth. And we had a vicar that came, and his wife taught at our school. And we just, for some reason, it felt to me to greet them and take them out. So we took them to the local minor league baseball team. And Reverend Rob Paul is this vicar, and he and I talked for 3 hours straight, ignoring the game. And I like to joke that that's when we knew it was true love. So he was kind of the final push for me to apply to seminary. And so I did. And I wanted to, I love theology. I love talking about Jesus, as you so obviously do, and I love it when that's obvious. When somebody talks and they're excited about it. It's just so refreshing. And you have that quality. And so it's, I went there and I did the regular MDiv. I did my vicarage in Palo Alto, California, which was really fun, really hard work, but it was awesome.
And you went to Concordia. You went to Concordia Theological Seminary, Fort Wayne.
Yes. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No.
And I do like to tease the other seminary, but I have met a ton of guys from that seminary that are awesome. So
Amen.
I have to watch myself. I can't tease too much, right? But we do have that rivalry, right?
Oh yeah. We're brothers though.
Oh, absolutely. I just wish they didn't beat us so many times in basketball. We have the basketball game every year, and man.
Super fun.
So, and then my first call was here in Rialto, California, and I've been here 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. It's just fantastic.
Tell us what, I love your story. Thank you for sharing it. I'm so glad the Lord led you to the LCMS and to confessional Lutheranism in general. Praise be to God. We need more men to go. We need more men to go on this journey right now. If you've listened to me at all, the creative ways we're trying to raise up leaders here is not over and against or in competition with our seminaries. For those who can, at whatever age or stage of life, for those who can make the move to go and be immersed at one of our two seminaries, please, by all means do it. So powerful. So thank you for being an example toward that end. What makes you so excited about what the Lord is doing at Grace Lutheran right now in Rialto?
Well, we're one of those churches that is small. When I came here, we were communing every week about 45, and now we're in between, 25, 27 each week communing. And so we have shrunk, and it's a strange phenomenon. These grandparents want to move and be close to their grandkids. I don't know what that's about, So we've lost some people that way, and I have done more funerals than anything else. And so we have lost people. And so we're one of those small churches, but we have two new families within the last year, but with them came 5 kids, and that is awesome. So now we have a total of 8 kids in our congregation, and that is just so fantastic. And, church doesn't really sound like church without kids, right?
Amen. That's right.
And so I'm super excited about it. And I love watching my older members interact with these new families. They are so excited as well. It's just, it just is a back and forth thing. Yeah. And it's fantastic. Yeah.
It really is. Multi-generational churches, which I think on our best days, our Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod congregations reflect that. It is such a gift for the old to learn from the young and love the young, disciple the young in the faith and the traditions of what it means to be a follower of Jesus in a local congregation, and for those that are older in years to say that we exist for the sake of the next generation, to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ, word and sacrament, to those who are up and coming, right? That multi-generational approach is so important. Anything more to add there, Bill?
Well, I love the picture in the New Testament. The older people mentor the younger people, and another thing I'm excited about at Grace is my congregation has really embraced the pro-life movement. Not that they weren't pro-life before, but that's something that's near and dear to me and my wife's heart. And they have really embraced it because I think the character of the congregation is determined not by the pastor, although he influences it, of course, but it's determined by the people there. I like to say I'm a plug and play part. At some point, God will take me away. God willing, not soon. Mm-hmm. But and you're going to have another pastor that's going to do the same job for you, and the congregation really determines that in a big way. That's our older, dearer Christians, and they really shape the young people, and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, it really is. Well, the reason we, even though we're in the Pacific Southwest District, you and I had not been able to chat yet. We will in our upcoming conferences, though, I'm sure, Bill. But you sent me a real kind email and really confessing that oftentimes on the missional confessional or whatever it is, traditional contemporary worship, and those are brother pastors who are doing something that is different than us, we have a tendency, and I think this is just based in our sin nature, right? To demonize
Absolutely.
the other side. You use this language in your email to demonize the other side, even within the LCMS. So what inspired you, Bill, to send that email?
I was just blown away by your and Christian's conversation with each other. And I know Christian Preuss. I got to hang out with him at seminary, and he was technically my pastor for 2 years, although I was at seminary. So, I don't know that it really counted per se. But so I know Christian, and I had seen you. I didn't know you, but I had seen you, and you can tell if you go to your websites, you can tell there's a difference, right? And so I was blown away by how joyful and nice the conversation was. And it's not like you were just talking about the weather, right? We can't agree on other things, so let's talk about the weather. And nowadays you can't even agree on that anymore. So, but I was just blown away. And then I think the joy that you guys both showed really convicted me that sometimes you can be maybe just a little overcritical. And I think my mother would agree. So it's not like this is a new problem. So, and I will confess, I do lean into the Gen X stereotypes a little too much. Grumpy old man, that's something I might aspire to be,
Yeah. And I think you use the word critical there, Bill. There's good reason to critique.
Oh, absolutely.
Not everything is good and right. And one of the missions of the Unite Leadership Collective is how do we critique agreeably or disagree agreeably and agree on what is most central for our work together in the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod. So let's lean into some critique. You are concerned about various church growth methods that you fear are coming into some corners of the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod. Yeah. And if people just take kind of a high level or just a drive-by, let's do a drive-by of the Unite Leadership Collective or even the parish that I get to pastor here at Christ Greenfield in Gilbert. Some may say, well, you're selling out to corporate America. You're using language that is counter to Scripture and the confessions. What are some of your fears? And I'm not offended. I lean into that kind of conversation for sure. I think we need to listen and learn from one another. So what are some of those church growth methods that you fear are here? What are your fears?
And I should preface it by saying this comes from my experience being at a Presbyterian church growth. And this Presbyterian church growth church did it as good as you can do it. The lead, both pastors were very charismatic, excellent speakers. The worship band or the band was led by a Dove Award winner. And they just, so it wasn't like it was a small church trying to do church growth, right? I have seen that, and that's a little scary. And in my LCMS, I have always been in what you would probably consider traditional churches. And so I don't know that I'm not trying to critique a current model of the LCMS because I really haven't seen it fairly. So, but from my own experience, it really boils down to the revivalistic aspects of the church growth movement. And that comes in a couple of ways. One is, who's the main actor in worship and the divine service? And like baptism, we would say the prime mover is Jesus, is God.
Right.
And with baptism, it's easier to see that if you understand God as the prime mover in baptism, you're going to have a totally different understanding of baptism than somebody that sees themselves as the prime mover in baptism. And I think it's similar with the divine service or with worship. We obviously respond with praise and thanksgiving and joy to God's gifts to us, but the main thing is God's gifts to us.
Yeah.
And so, in my understanding, that means there should be some reverence. Now, I have lived in California now for the third time, and I will freely admit reverence, it looks different in California than it does in the Midwest or in New York. And there's nothing wrong with that. Reverence is one of those weird words. I don't know if I can define it, but I can tell you when I see it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. So I'm not saying you have to have a 3-piece suit or a dress down to the ankle, because that's just not going to happen. And there's nothing wrong with a more casual type of reverence. But I think reverence is a key to confessing the physical presence of God serving you his gifts.
Let's pause there. That's so good. So reverence, we break down the word, right? It's to revere, or another synonym would be to worship. And we gather to be, and this is the best parts of our, I think, Lutheran liturgy, to be restored, to be grounded in our identity, to confess that we're broken, miserable sinners, to hear the forgiveness of sins from a called and ordained servant of the word, to say, man, I need to be immersed in the word. And then obviously the prayers of the church, obviously the sacrament, Lord's Supper, leaving with the benediction. I agree with the order of the divine service. The reverence, though, in, say, a more modern instrumentation, and maybe with younger worshipers, maybe with a culture, because this gets into diverse cultures, right?
Right.
A more of an extroverted, maybe overtly joyful, and leadership is a big deal from the pastor. So if the pastor's personality maybe leaning into a little bit, right, more extroversion, joy, passion, a little louder, or the pastor's personality shaped. Hopefully there's kind of a marriage here that's appropriate and a challenge even, but a pastor who has a little bit more of an introverted. Both are reverent if they are elevating the word of God. If we gather to be restored by passive faith from the extranos God who descends to us, he comes to do the work in the liturgy. We're not working, but the way that gets expressed is going to look different based on diverse personalities from the respective pastors, and then probably their leadership team who are around them shaping the respective culture. But I think we need to leave room, right, Bill, for diverse personalities with reverence maybe looking, but we should still agree on the divine service and God's work for us. This is core Lutheranism, right? If we lose that, I mean, it's not about us seeking him. It's about him seeking us, right? This is where language is really, really important. And Lutherans have a lot to offer in the wider Christian conversation. But if we can't agree on diverse personalities and then diverse contexts, I think we're going to just end up talking right past each other in the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod. Any response to that, Bill?
Oh, I like how you say that. And you're right. We have to be careful with the language. My junior high and high school years were in Indiana, and I'm going to the Space Chapel. I had no idea it was a hotbed of Lutheranism. I had no clue. I'm like, how is that possible? I wasn't shy about my faith. How did I not know about this? And I think Lutherans have been guilty for far too long of not confessing their faith publicly. And so what we have is awesome. And why don't more people know about it? Because you're right. We have so much to offer the church, the wider church. And if they only knew, but maybe because I struggle with what is the public square? And I think you are captured a piece of it with YouTube, right? With podcasts. That's definitely a piece of it. But how do I go to the public square in Rialto? I mean, I go down to the center of town. If I go down there at certain times, I might get mugged, So that's one thing I struggle with as a pastor, especially an older pastor, is how does my church and myself confess the faith to my community? Right. Mm-hmm. What is that?
Yeah. Well, no, you're exactly right. And technology, like it or hate it, it is what it is, and people are on their phones now. So I think the like online debate in the LCMS, COVID kind of settled, because do you have a live stream of your worship or no?
I don't, but I did have Facebook lived it during COVID, and we did not meet for a little while, and then we came back before we were technically able to. And my assistant pastor, who's an SMP pastor, kind of chided me because I put it on Facebook Live, and I'm like, yeah, this is breaking the law. But we did it in such a way, we took every precaution we could. So we weren't just flippantly breaking the law, but we were trying to obey God rather than man and meet. Mm-hmm. And so I did put it on Facebook Live for our parishioners that just could not come in. If you're 80 and you're prone to pneumonia, you should take COVID seriously, right? I mean,
absolutely, for sure.
So when we were done, as far as like when it was okay to come back publicly again in California, I did a period of about a month to 2 months, and then I stopped doing the live stream. And the reason I did is I wanted to encourage people. If you can make it, great, come, be in person with us. That's the fellowship, the mutual consolation of the brotherhood. But if you can't, let me know. I will come visit you. I'll bring church to you. And so I wanted to encourage that mentality. And so I didn't live stream for that reason. No. And the production quality is not that great. So
Right. So I respect that decision. I respect pastors who took a stand, if you will, and said people have to gather. Being in Arizona, our laws were not as strict, and so we had a little bit more Christian freedom. But one of my interesting observations right now is I do believe Christian freedom is being pressed. I think the religious opportunity and our first article amendment, right? I mean, to the free speech. I think that is a direct affront right now by many people in our secular culture. I'm actually embracing it. I think it's a great time. I don't know what other posture we have, right? But it's a great time to be a follower of Jesus and to bring light to dark places. But I think pastors are going to be confronted with some difficult conversations or decisions. And are we going to cower in fear? I'll tell you this. I'll say this publicly anywhere. I've said, if I ever get applause, it's not me getting applause. It's the gospel of Jesus getting applause in church. Absolutely. It's to say, we will never do what we did. 2 months, 3 months, whatever. People have to gather. People have to make respective choices, but the word of God will not be stopped. People need to hear the forgiveness of sins, to taste and see the goodness of Jesus through his very body and blood, right? We're not going to do that again. Any comments, though, on the potential for our religious freedoms to be attacked?
Oh, it's being attacked left and right, and it's so important. The Constitution is a man-made document, a product of Western civilization, but it's so good when it's carried out faithfully. And the freedom of the press, our freedom to speak freely, is so critical. And I will add to yours that, yeah, it does seem darker, but when it's darker, the gospel shines brighter. And I love that, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We must stand together in the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod so that people can hear the gospel of Jesus and receive word and sacrament. So let's pivot. Sometimes I throw out the debate between the missional and confessional Lutheran, and I think more of that. I'd love to get your take on this. I think in having a lot of conversations, a lot of podcasts, more of this is a personality conversation and maybe even sociological than it is overtly theological. Though I can ping at a few different points of doctrine where we may have a nuance or an angle by which we're talking. But yeah, any opinion on the missional confessional, which I think is a false dichotomy conversation that sometimes is had in the LCMS?
I definitely agree with you that it's a false dichotomy, because every congregation by their very existence is missional. That's just what they are. And I think it's a way to try to acknowledge the divide between those who are liturgical and those who are more, I don't want to say any kind of derogatory, more contemporary, I guess.
Sure.
And I don't mean that pejoratively at all. I just mean it's a different thing. And I think that's one way to name that divide so that we can talk about it more freely. And I think it has a huge theological component, and that's the lex orandi, lex credendi kind of thing. The rule of prayer is the rule of faith. In other words, your practice determines your beliefs and vice versa. So I like to always say, if you ever see a Green Bay Packer in purple, you know they lost a bet, right? They're never going to wear purple, right? They hate the Minnesota Vikings. So, and so I think the vehicle that the gifts are delivered in matters. And I think that's one of the differences. And it's not that contemporary people or practices don't think the vehicle is unimportant. It's just a different vehicle. And I bet probably either side would, okay, my side is the Porsche and you guys are driving a little Chevette. And then it would be the other way. Well, no, my side's the Porsche and you're in a little Chevette. And I think we need to let go of some of that. But I think there is a difference. And my concerns with the revivalism is that the practices are incorporated without understanding the theology behind those practices. Praise music is a great example. I love Bach now. I grew up on the radio. I couldn't stand Bach at first. It took me forever. But anything good, true, and beautiful is worth the effort to learn that it's actually true, good, and beautiful. And I think I see the divine service as a true, good, and beautiful. And it does take massive effort for us modern people who grew up on radio and TV like I did to appreciate what's going on. But it's worth the effort. And I think it's salutary for us. But praise music, I will say, has come a long way. Back when I was in that type of church, 99% of the praise music is decision theology, right? Yep. Back in the late 90s, the early 2000s, it's all praise music. It's all decision theology. We don't believe that as Lutherans, so we probably shouldn't sing those songs. But I will say I think there's better praise music now. And so maybe it's possible that some praise music can be salutary and beautiful. And I think it takes a lot of discernment to discover which ones those are, because it originally came about to motivate people through their emotions, which has the side effect of teaching people, how do I know I'm saved? Well, trust your emotions. Well, no. You hit it earlier with the extra nos. God works on us through means that are outside of us. And because God's doing the acting, we can have complete confidence I look in the mirror of the law or just the mirror, and I'm like, wow, I see the effects of sin. And, you can't fix ugly, right? and we're ugly because of sin. And so, but God acts on me without any merit or worthiness in me. And so I can have complete trust that I am forgiven. I am a child of God. And that's so comforting. And I'm not saying that every praise music song is going to try to teach you to trust your emotions, but I think it's a concern that we need to look at.
Well, so much.
Yeah,
there.
Sorry, so much there. It's dumped.
I know, it's great. This is why I wanted to have you on, and not just to talk about worship wars, but for us, I think for us to unite, it takes those of us like myself who were raised with, yes, the hymnal. And let me set it in this way.
Yeah.
I've never really worried about, because I'm a third generation LCMS guy, right? My roots in terms of our theology, it's just in me. So I guess when a new, form of worship, contemporary Michael W. Smith, back in the day, I'm thinking Stephen Curtis Chapman, Go West, Young Man, Amy Grant, kind of some of them kind of came on, taking, the instrumentation that was in the world and then incorporating Jesus into it. I guess for a guy like me as a kid, and for my dad too, it's like, well, not that big a deal. And then, but this is what I will give you is that a lot of the earlier music was decision theology. I agree with that. And I remember singing something like, I don't know if I'd exactly articulate it that way. But I still know extra nos reality, that I'm a child of God, baptismal grace, etc. So there wasn't necessarily the fear, I think, for some of us to take a modern form and then, incorporate it into. But those of us, this is why your story is so important. You've seen the effects, and I could list a number of brothers right now who have seen the effects of bad theology entering into, contemporary, stirring up the emotions. So let's just talk about emotions really quick. We are feeling things before we're thinking things, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
we are drawn to Christ because he's been drawn to us. So my emotions can stir. We had a rousing Reformation Day service the other day, traditional, right? I mean, organs going, bells, choir, it was an emotional thing. Singing A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, for sure. So that's not necessarily the enemy. It's the enemy is when our emotions are needed in order to recognize the presence of God, right? When our emotions are drawn away from maybe the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. When that's not what we feel, then God has left. That is the fear, right? We have to draw to him for him to draw to us. No. It works the other way. This is what we have. But emotions are not necessarily an evil thing. They must be, let's use this, stewarded appropriately after the heart and mind of God. And leaders, man, that worship today, that was spectacular. But then our people go and, they're not experiencing the highs out in the world because of the diagnosis or, the mental illness, etc. And so has God abandoned them and they got to come back to worship to get the Jesus juice again? No, we don't. That's not how it works. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree with you there. I also would add that contemporary worship, modern instrumentation in many of our LCMS congregations is not going anywhere. So what should we do? We should make sure that the songs that we sing point to the narrative of Scripture, point to the extra nos realities. And there's a group right now connected to Concordia University there in Irvine.
Oh, right.
And there's a songwriters initiative going on right now. A couple of our leaders are a part of that. And I'll tell you what, Bill, the songs are very, very Lutheran,
right?
And they're going to move and have an impact on the wider church. Praise be to God. We should be having that sort of an effort. But I think we lost the creative invitation early over the means, over the battle over should a drum, should a guitar, these types of things. And I think we may have missed for a season. You could even call it a generation, the opportunity to say, we should be wise in how we incorporate new worship means, and we should start writing really good worship songs. I don't know that was encouraged early on in the contemporary. So we were just borrowing stuff from the wider evangelical world, and I think that was not good. So
and I think you've highlighted why we always have had a problem with our English hymnals, because when we had to make the switch from German to English, we didn't have that many hymns translated, so they just grabbed from the surrounding Christendom, which was revivalistic and works righteousness. And so we've never had like a pure hymnal, that doesn't exist. But and I think emotions need trained. I grew up and a child of the 80s. I would say that one of my biggest criticisms of that time is a lack of training of the emotions of the young people. And, I think we're going to have emotions. God created us with them. They are good and salutary, but they need trained. And, sadly, I watched too many YouTube clips, the short clips, the shorts. And it's amazing. You'll see grown men and women having temper tantrums in public. I'm like, who has failed them to make them think that this is okay? That's and so I think maybe now I will say I love the organ. It's fantastic. There is no other instruments that blend so well with the singing, but I think you can do the Divine Service 3 with hymnody with acoustic guitars, and it would be beautiful, right? And so maybe we can blend some things. But I would say I would appreciate it if the choir or the band would move off center stage. And I think I like having the altar there, or the cross or the crucifix to meditate on while I'm Well, it's different being a pastor, right? You participate a different way. But and having something sacred that looks sacred to meditate on, to look at, to focus on, and having the band to the side, I think would be helpful. So I think both sides can make some compromises and it still be salutary. And certainly, I'm never going to tell another church or a pastor how they should be. I don't have that authority at all. I think, based on my experience and my study and my knowledge, I think this is our best practices. But I'm not your master. Jesus is, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. Let's talk about another point of maybe brotherly disagreement around the need for more church workers. I think we can agree the LCMS needs more. All the data points to it. Teachers for our schools, all the way up to pastors, et cetera, right? And a lot of our congregations do not have Reverend Bill Maggards who are bringing word and sacrament. And similar sized congregations like yours, they may be served by retired interim. My dad's actually serving a congregation right now. He retired from his kind of medium-large congregation of 25 years and then took a smaller parish in Boulder, Colorado, and is just loving it. By the way.
Thank God for his service.
Love him. Yeah, well, and it's a similar size congregation to yours, Bill, and he's it's just a sweet, precious experience for him. And my concern is, my dad's probably going to be on planet Earth, God willing, for another 20 years or so. What happens in the next generation when the incoming classes of pastors? Because my class, I like to tell my story here, Bill. I mean, when I graduated from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, we were over 100 residential MDiv in my class, and I know the class sizes are much smaller right now. And then some people will just look at the demographics of the decline of churches. Some churches are just going to close, and we are going to regress to maybe some will say a right size, that the amount of pastors that we're getting right now are going to serve the only churches that can even support a pastor right now. And then this is my final point. But then my fear is, or my concern, I don't like the word fear. My concern is that because the perfect love of Jesus casts out fear.
That's right.
But my concern is that the innovation that is needed right now to reverse the curve, to hold on to the kingdom assets that we have in our congregations, the innovation is not going to be there. And well, frankly, more people are going to miss out on receiving word and sacraments and coming to know who Jesus is, being discipled and then found. So yeah, comments there. So all that to say, I think we need to raise up more bivocational, co-vocational leaders in the method in which we're seeking to do so at the local level. One of our base beliefs, Bill, is that every congregation has, for the pastoral office, men who could, not all can or should, but who could become pastors if a route were recognized for them. And what we're doing right now with competency-based theological education is one means, it's not the only means, but one means that's working for many to stay local and to not have this kind of presupposition that, I'm going to come out and then I'm going to have a full-time call. No, I'm going to serve a small group of people. Hopefully it grows, but even if not, this is not my primary means of income. So that's the co-vocational route. You're actively choosing, right. To be in a parish where you have another job. So I don't see in our current routes that sort of a push for bivocational and co-vocational leaders. So that's it. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Obviously, you're absolutely right. It's crisis level, and it's the same for every Christian denomination in our country. And we're facing the same battle everyone else is facing. And traditionally, we have been stronger in how we train our men to serve as pastors. Both seminaries are just fantastic institutions. Yep. Aside from that little blip in St. Louis in '74, but aside from that, just fantastic institutions. And boy, I'm excited about the new leadership at Concordia St. Louis. Just fantastic and great to see. And I think it raises up men that are ready to serve the day they graduate. Now they're going to make mistakes, obviously, right? I know I've made my share, but they're ready to serve. And I think as long as we honor the Augustana 14, where nobody preaches or administers the sacraments without a rightly ordered call, should serve in that. But what does a rightly ordered call mean? I think that's what there's room for discussion. And I've always understood it as training, examination, and ordination. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to talk about the training. And I think, do we need a 4-year residential? I think absolutely. I try to think back and think, what class would I skip? I wouldn't skip any of them, and I kind of wish I had some more. And so it's like, but I think the alternate route is a neat program. I know some guys that did that. And so you have 2 years of residential, 1 year of vicarage. But I think if you have a faithful pastor and he mentors a guy for 4 years, 3 years, and that guy gets education, I think it's possible to use that guy as a pastor to call him and ordain him. And I will say, it's really funny. God has a sense of humor. In my class, I graduated in 2018. There was one guy that was most vocal against the SMP program. You can guess who.
I don't know.
It was me.
Oh, okay.
So,
I wasn't connecting the dots there, Bill.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was the one guy in my class that got an SMP pastor. So I thought, okay, thank you, God. And I love my SMP pastor. I trust him implicitly. But one thing I have noticed is, I don't think it's intentional, but it's created a 2-tier pastorate.
That's right.
Okay? My assistant, who I trust implicitly, and who, when I go and he serves, I don't have any worries, which is a luxury, as you know. And so it's fantastic. He's an awesome guy, awesome dad, awesome teacher, and I love him dearly. And so I've gotten to really appreciate him, but he has to be under my supervision. And for me was a little awkward. I'm coming right out of seminary and I'm supposed to be your supervisor and you've been ordained for a year. So, how does that quite work? And we made it work, but I think that if we're going to say a guy is, okay, you're trained, we've examined you, we agree that you are biblical and confessional, let's ordain you, then let's ordain him. Let's make him a pastor. And I think
what you're appealing for is the general ordination. What I talk to a lot of the general ordination kind of category for, I'm not using maybe the exact right terms, but the category for the ordained, because all of our SMP guys are ordained, but they're not a general ordination pastor that is free to be called and sent to different places, right? They're in the specific spot. So there could still be a role for that, but could we have a conversation based on the distance education to get them an MDiv and maybe additional training languages? I don't know what it exactly is. We need to have that conversation to allow more of them, because not much of that. I mean, you still got to go back to the seminary for, I don't know, for a while to get the MDiv right now, because we don't have an online MDiv. Could there be a way for an online MDiv to be given to an SMP pastor? I think that's the how of training that needs to be more deeply explored, so that this kind of two-tier I'm going to say CMC guys, the guys out of Irvine, who are general ordination, they also feel kind of second class, and that's a bummer. So if you're a pastor, if you're called and ordained, SMP, whatever it is, this has to be the baseline. Treat one another with dignity and respect. Who hold that office, that will go an awful long way. Anything more to add to that, though, Bill? Yeah,
I think it's important that if a guy is ordained and we trust him, let's trust him. And I'm with you on, since the digital training has become so much better, I think there is possibility to blending some digital online training with campus training. Maybe we could have intensives act as that. And I think in that case, it would be critical that you have a mentor pastor for that young man that actually mentors him.
Yep. Huge. And that is the marrying or the merging. And there's always been a battle here since the monastic movement kind of centered. This is going back, 1400 years, when the first academies, if you will, for training in the Catholic Church were started. This disconnect often between the academy and the pastor. And I think we've got the local pastor. I think we can do a better job of bringing pastor, grassroots guy, you and I, right, to the table in the formation conversation. That's good. I think we generally agree some sort of change needs to occur, but what that is, we'll wait on the Lord and the leaders the Lord has placed in positions of influence in the Lutheran Church-Missouri Synod. Last question here. Okay. I am grateful to get to learn with a brother like you. Like I need more confessional, and I use this in the best sense of the term, right? Conservative, maybe slower to change leaders in me, because the way God made me is driven, and start new things, build, measure, learn. And I need to have a brother, and I have these brothers in my life who say, let's think about this. I think this is the best role of like a circuit, right? What's some of the new stuff you're doing? How are you doing it? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about the impact maybe on a sister congregation down the road, et cetera? And just respect for the different personalities and approaches. We need everyone here. But one of my primary concerns or observations from a systems perspective is that because we've not leaned into the diverse personalities within our church, there's been an unintentional, I think it's unintentional, or maybe subconscious divide that has taken place that has put us into various camps, labels, and then we move them off to the side so that I don't have to talk to that person. Whatever the label is, I just don't think it's very, very helpful. So And I've put this invitation out. I appreciate you coming on. If you've got a difference of opinion, let's get together and let's talk about it and agree on the essentials, which is the scripture and the confession. So why do you think there is this trend for maybe guys who come from diverse seminaries, for instance, to not talk and have a brotherly conversation? Any thoughts there?
That's a hard one. And part of it is you kind of sometimes you feel entrenched. To be fair, I think when I came out here, I did not always feel like I had my district on my side. I feel like that they want pastors of all kinds for all kinds of people, except the traditional guys, right? Mm-hmm. And I do feel that way sometimes. And so that kind of, my reaction to that, which is not good, but my reaction is, okay, I'm going to entrench then. I'm going to, and there is a place for brothers to duke it out. And that's one of the great things about the residential program. Me and my classmates, we really, it got personal, but we knew we loved each other and it was a safe space to do it, right? Like right here on this forum, we're not going to duke it out like, no gloves kind of duking it out, because this isn't the proper forum for that. But you and I and other pastors in a winkle or just hanging out, having a beer or whatever, that's the perfect place. And I would love to see more of that myself. And I don't know, it is possible that some might think there is no possibility for unity with these diverse styles or ways of worship. And I think that's a fair question, but I think to give up on talking about it is the wrong thing to do. So.
Yes. Amen. Amen. This has been so much fun, Bill, praying for you and your congregation, praying that more families would come to receive word and sacrament there, and just praying that the joy of the Lord would be upon you in your labor of love in leading God's people by the Spirit's power closer to Him, the author and perfecter of our faith. If people want to connect with you, Bill, how can they do so?
Well, first, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And my prayers for your church and efforts as well. We're both workers in the vineyard, right? And it's a joyful vocation for sure. Probably the best way to get a hold of us is gracelutheranrialto.com. And you can, if you're familiar with the LCMS lookups, I'm on there. My church is on there. So it's pretty easy to find, I think.
So good. This is Lead Time Sharing is Caring. Please like, subscribe, comment wherever it is you take in podcasts, and we'll promise to be back next week to have more, hopefully loving and challenging conversations with leaders like Reverend Bill Maggard. Thanks so much, brother. It was an honor.
Thank you, Tim. It was an honor to be here.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC's mission is to collaborate with the local church to discover, develop, and deploy leaders through biblical Lutheran doctrine and innovative methods. To partner with us in this gospel message, subscribe to our channel, then go to theuniteleadership.org to create your free login for exclusive material and resources, and then to explore ways in which you can sponsor an episode. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode.